Somewhere in the South China Sea, a small boat was rushing towards an unknown destination. Captain John Finnegan and his crew were busy keeping their ship intact amidst a raging storm, when a mercenary called Hanover entered the helm. Hanover hired John to take his team to an undisclosed area in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, a luxury ship called Argonautica, owned by Simon Canton, also happened to be cruising along the same sea. Simon addressed the crowd of rich people and started the greatest party of their lifetime. Lurking in the party was a wanted thief named Trillian. She casually bumped into Captain Atherton and stole his wallet before leaving the scene. While the mercenaries were fooling around with each other, Joey, John's mechanic, snuck past them and discovered that they were carrying several torpedoes aboard the boat. Realizing they were in deep shit, Joey was about to report their situation to John, but he was caught by Vivo, one of the mercenaries. Joey got thrown in the room with the rest of the mercenaries, and he immediately got turned into a sandbag as punishment for being nosy. Layla, Joey's girlfriend, heard the commotion and forced John to do something. Reluctantly, John had to engage the mercenaries in a calm and friendly manner just to save his mechanic's ass. Back on Argonautica, Trillian used the captain's card to enter the vault inside the captain's chamber. But before she could steal anything, Simon, along with Captain Atherton, caught her and sent her into the brig. Meanwhile, in the operating room of Argonautica, a mysterious person uploaded a program that corrupted the mainframe, resulting on multiple system failures, grinding the ship to a halt. Under the sea, something humongous were rapidly rising directly beneath the Argonautica. The thing collided with the ship, which quickly caused a mass panic resulting to a stampede. A woman tried to seek shelter inside a lavatory to escape the madness, but something suddenly came out of the toilet and pulled her in. Back in John's boat, the mercenaries were busy installing something outside when the boat suddenly slammed into something, knocking down their engine in the process. Luckily, they discovered that a luxurious cruise ship just happened to be nearby, which means that they can get some help. But before they could do so, Hanover took over command while his mercenary team held John and his crew at gunpoint. Layla was left behind with Billy, one of the mercenaries, while the rest of them climbed aboard the Argonautica. Inside the ship, they discovered that everything was a mess and they couldn't find anybody to give them a welcome party. Despite the red flags obviously scattered around the scene of the crime, the crew carried on because it makes perfect sense. Upon reaching a gambling den, Hanover instructed two of his mercenaries, T-Ray and Mamuli, to take John and Joey to the machine room, so they can grab the parts they needed to fix the boat. Inside the brig, Trillian woke up and used her hairpin to fry the circuit of the door lock, in order to escape. Back to John's boat, Layla was busy patching up the hole in the engine room, when a dead body suddenly turned up in front of her. She carefully walked towards it, but before she could process the situation, something emerged out of the water, and swiftly dragged her towards the afterlife. Back in Argonautica, John and Joey were busy tinkering with engine parts when suddenly, T-Ray noticed a strange sound coming from a hallway. The curious mercenary went out to check on the unusual sound, in exchange for his miserable life. Realizing that something bad happened, Mamuli snapped out of his perverted thoughts, then immediately blamed the other two. Back in the captain's quarters, Trillian was about to enter the treasure room when she was discovered by Hanover and his men. While she was being interrogated by Hanover, Vivo took the card on her hand and opened the door to the vault. Right after the door opened, Simon swung an axe towards him, abruptly ending his lifespan. In retaliation, Mulligan and Mason peppered the room with bullets, killing 3 extras in the process. While Simon and the captain was explaining the situation to the mercenaries, Trillian got the opportunity to disappear. Mamuli called Hanover through the comms, and informed him that T-Ray was dead. John interrupts their conversation and insisted that they should immediately get out of there, which triggered Mamuli. But before Mamuli could go crazy, something grabbed his feet, and spilled his blood all over the engine room, before completely dragging him out of the screen. Panicked, John opened fire at the helpless inanimate pipes, while Joey scrambled to bag the engine parts that they need. Hearing the commotion, Hanover and his crew quickly rushed out to investigate. While fleeing, John and Joey bumped into Trillian on the elevator, and the three quickly became friends. Unfortunately, on their way up, they were blocked by Hanover and his men. Hanover and the rest entered the elevator, only to be greeted by a bumpy ride. The elevator fell down, then vomited them out into a bloody hallway, with several human skeletal remains scattered all over it. After a small dose of hysteria, the group was alerted by something that was trying to destroy the door at the end of the hallway. After a nonverbal agreement, Hanover gave John a gun, and they both walked towards the door, ready to fire at a moment's notice. While sneaking, Mason stepped on a skull which startled the group and made them panic. Hearing the commotion, the thing on the other side of the door started to act aggressively by squeezing through the metal walls of the hallway. While the others ran away, John and Hanover slowly pulled back while shooting at the metal walls, even though it clearly wasn't very effective. Back on John's boat, Billy came down to the engine room to check on Layla, but found nothing. Meanwhile, John and the others reached a safe room and decided to recollect themselves. During a discussion, John was able to deduce that one of them was the one who sabotaged the ship's mainframe. When pressed for answers, Simon finally came clean, and admitted that he was the one who hired Hanover to loot the ship and blow it up, so he can then collect the insurance afterwards. A drama unfolded between Simon and the captain, allowing Trillian to steal a handgun for herself. Before the group could come up with any kind of solution to their predicament, something big appeared behind Joey, startling him in the process. After what feels like eternity, they finally got a glimpse of what they were up against. Several long and massive tentacle-like creatures were just chilling on top of the ceiling, minding their own business. He didn't really have to shoot at it, but John decided that it was a great idea. Agitated by the disruption, one of the tentacles regurgitated a prey that it has recently caught. The group were in shock to find out that the partially digested human being in front of them was none other than Billy. In retaliation, they opened fire at the tentacles, further digging up their own graves by aggravating it. Due to the disturbance, the group fanned out to different directions. John bumped into Trillian, and despite their dire situation, they still managed to flirt with each other. All of a sudden, a tentacle appeared between them and separated the two. The tentacle revealed its fangs, then lunged towards John, hoping to grab a quick bite. But Trillian suddenly arrived to save the day, immediately causing the tentacle to retreat. While running away, they stumbled upon the captain, but he was being harassed by a tentacle. John and Trillian tried to help the captain, but their efforts were futile. The others arrived at the scene, but did nothing but stare. After the demise of the captain, they all stayed there and discussed the nature of the creature instead of prioritizing their safety. Following the seminar, John finally realized that getting back to his small boat is their best chance in getting out of there alive. Not having any brighter ideas, Hanover and his men had no choice but to tag along. They arrived on a dead end, where the only passage available was under a flooded room. Since they had no other choice but to swim through, John took the risk, taking Hanover and Mulligan with him to the other side. Meanwhile, the four that was left behind was anxiously waiting for a go signal, when a tentacle aggressively approached them. Realizing that he isn't going to be much of a help, Simon took this time to make a break for it. In the ensuing firefight, Trillian couldn't handle the recoil and was pushed back towards the water. Despite being a complete coward, Joey stayed back to fight a little, before turning tail and running away. After taking some damage, the creature pulled back and Mason decided to flee by jumping into the water. Thirsting for revenge, the creature quickly went after them, and it managed to latch on Mason's leg. Despite the low visibility and the fact that they were underwater, Joey heard Mason's squeals. He decided to turn around, only to see Mason getting devoured by a tentacle. Despite his suffering, Mason refused to go down without a fight, so he went out with a bang. Joey made it to the other side and told the rest about Mason's demise. Mulligan completely freaked out and argued for all of them stay put and wait for rescue. But the rest of them realized that it was a stupid idea. In the middle of their argument, they noticed a tentacle behind Mulligan ready to strike. Mulligan reacted quickly and made the first move, but instead of helping him, the others decided that leaving him was for the best. Mulligan was able to momentarily fend off the tentacle, but while he was busy basking on his shallow victory, it pulled off a reverse card and snacked on his body. While running through the hallway, the tentacles sealed off all the exits that the group has ran into. The group realized that the tentacles were leading them towards the bowel of the ship, but they had no choice but to play along. On their way there, they happened along a branching path, but Simon told them it leads back to where they came from, so the group continued on forward. Simon purposely got himself left behind, then proceeded to disappear through the branching path. Finally, the group was able to reach the bowel of the ship. What they found there was a stinking pile of regurgitated remains of the unlucky passengers. The tentacles broke through the hull, which allowed the seawater to gush forth into the room. While making a run for it, the group got separated once again. John and Trillian almost managed to catch up to Simon, but they couldn't get to him in time. On the other hand, Hanover and Joey wasn't very lucky. The two were being chased by the tentacles, so Hanover used a grenade to buy them some time to escape. Meanwhile, John realized that he lost the bag of engine parts that he was carrying. He tried to go back and retrieve it, but the water quickly made him change his mind. Realizing they can't outrun the tentacles, Hanover decided to sacrifice Joey by shooting his leg. Quick-witted, Joey managed to drag himself up to a garbage chute before the tentacles could get to him. When John and Trillian got out of the luxurious ship, they saw an island nearby where they can seek refuge. The two came up with a plan to reach the island without having to repair the boat. Joey, on the other hand, managed to limp back to the gambler's den. He took a little breather, and tried to take a gun that just happened to be lying on the floor. Suddenly, Hanover came out of nowhere and scared the shit out of him. He was about to shoot Hanover when he realized that Hanover was in the process of being eaten by a tentacle. Feeling pity for Hanover, Joey gave him the gun before he took off. Hanover, being a prick, pointed the gun at Joey and pulled the trigger. But the shot missed, so Hanover gave up on life and decided to end his misery. To his horror, the gun didn't have any bullet left, forcing him to walk into the gates of hell while still alive. Meanwhile, Trillian went back to the cargo bay to find a working jet ski with enough fuel to take them to the island. John was checking on the torpedo when Joey suddenly barged in for a happy reunion. Realizing that John lost the engine parts and that his love life was in ruins, Joey was greatly disheartened, but he still tried to fix the boat into working condition. John prepared the torpedo and set the boat in autopilot. Back in Argonautica, Trillian found the keys to the jet ski, but Simon suddenly arrived and demanded that she hand it over. Trillian tried to run away from Simon, but still got caught anyway. Before she could hand Simon the keys, John arrived and sprayed Simon with bullets. But due to Simon's plot armor, not a single bullet hit him and he was able to escape. The two was about to flirt when the main body of the tentacles barged in and politely introduced itself. The mutated octopus grabbed John, but instead of killing him on the spot, it just had to take a good look at John's face. Taking the opportunity, John took out his shotgun and shot its adorable puppy eyes. The creature writhed in pain and the two was able to flee from it. Trillian went back to the cargo bay to get the jet ski, and John hightailed back to his boat to get Joey. But when he reached the boat, the place was in a complete mess and Joey was gone. Dismayed, but determined, John started up the boat, then heads back to the cargo bay to meet with Trillian. Seeing that John's boat was leaving, Simon jumped towards it in exchange for one of his legs. Back in the cargo bay, John and Trillian were ready to leave, but the mutated tentacles appeared and blocked their path. They drove through a different path while the creature aggressively chased them from behind. Meanwhile, Simon managed to crawl his way to the bridge only to find out that the boat is on autopilot and can't be manually overridden. The boat collided with Argonautica, and the resulting explosion blew it up into pieces, taking Simon with it. Fortunately, John and Trillian managed to escape just in the nick of time, and the two were able to reach the island. Happy to be alive, the two finally found the time to smash. While celebrating, the two was interrupted by the arrival of a stowaway, who turned out to be none other than Joey, the comic relief. It turned out that before the creature could make a meal out of him, he jumped overboard and swam away like there's no tomorrow. The three celebrated for managing to survive the ordeal, when they suddenly heard a loud roar in the distance. Something big was approaching them, destroying the trees on its wake. The trio stood in fear, when they realized that the nightmare they've encountered in the ship was just the tutorial stage.